Okay, shalom, shalom, Chevra, let's get started. Bezat Hashem. Bezat Hashem. Hashem Naseh v'natzliach. I want to share with you today, Bezat Hashem, a beautiful idea that comes from this week's Parshat, Parshat Teruma. You go through most of this week's Parsha, and it's talking about building the kelim in the Mishkan. You don't understand anything, right? Numbers and sizes and pieces of furniture in the Mishkan. It's very complicated, very technical. And you look at it and you say to yourself, is like, Ma zeh shayach? What does it have to do with me? Okay, they built a Mishkan back in the day. But what lessons are we supposed to learn from this? Alo, chevre. Zat Hashem, our learning should be refuah shlema. Zat Hashem. So, let's talk a little bit about something very, very practical, actually, that we learn from the kelim of the Mishkan. That's what we're going to talk about today. And specifically, we're going to focus in on the importance of the chashivut of limud Torah. That's really what we're going to focus in on today, as this also comes from the Mishkan, and we'll talk about that as well. We spoke about it this morning. We're going to speak about it again now. Okay. You're the only one that was here from this morning, so Baruch Hashem. If you look in Teruma, and it also follows in Tetzaveh, there's 3 kelim in the Mishkan that have something called a zer. What is a zer?
Okay.
No? Zer is really like a crown. Okay?
Yeah, zer.
Zer is like a crown.
All right.
There's 3 kelim in the Mishkan that possess a zer. I'll show you them right now. We're going to go through them, and I'll show you. It's actually a midrash that highlights this, and it's very interesting what the symbolism of this is. Listen to this. I'll show you the 3 examples, and then there's a 4th. This is the unknown one. This 4th. So the first one is we find the Aron HaKodesh. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them to build the Aron. Aron is very special. What was very special about the Aron? A lot of things, but Aron, they put the luchot inside of it. The Aron was called Aron. It also was. It's a small thing, not big.
No, it's a long, but
yeah, not so big. Not so big. It looked like this. Beautiful. Aron is something very special. Perhaps one could say the holiest of the kelim in the Mishkan, the holiest. And if you look, it's Perek Chafhei, Pasuk Yud Aleph. It says, "V'tzibito to zahav tahor mibayit u'michutz." Outside and inside is coated in gold. Titzapenu. Ve'asita alav zer zahav saviv. You put on the Aron zer zahav saviv. What is that referring to? Zer, crown, zahav saviv, of gold around it. Now, if you look at the picture, the art school does us a favor. If you want to bring a chumash, you can see it yourself. This is the Aron. You see this little crown, or these little fence on the top of the Aron. If you look closely, you see over here? You see? I can put it for this. Right on top of the box, you can see a little, it looks like a fence almost, a tiny little fence. You see? That's the zer. That's zer zahav.
This is square.
Square. Okay, so that was because the Aron was square, so it was square. Okay. So it was a crown for the Aron called a zer. Okay, that's example number 1. Now we move forward and we look at what's the next example? Anybody know? Where else? What's the next place that we find that there's a zer? Not every keli has this. The Shulchan, thank you very much. You look at the Shulchan. You can see I pulled up the psukim here. Give me a second. It's Perek Chafhei, Pasuk Chavdal. This is talking about the Shulchan. What was the Shulchan? It was the table that they used to use for putting specifically Lechem HaPanim. These were the breads that were consumed in the Beit HaMikdash. And it says by the Shulchan, V'tzipita oto zahav tahor, coated in pure gold. Ve'asita lo zer zahav saviv. You make for it a crown of gold. And where was that crown of gold? So again, Art Scroll does us a favor. If everybody wants to take a look, if you had a chumash, it would be easier. At the base of the table, over here at the bottom, right on top of it, there's a little fence on the base of the table. Just above it, a little fence of gold that went around it called a zer. It seems very insignificant, very unimportant, but the Torah speaks about it, so we have to know what it is. What's the next example? This is not in this week's Parshat. Not in this week's Parshat, it's Titzaveh. The end of Titzaveh, the Torah talks about building the Mizbeach HaZahav. There was Mizbeach HaAdama, which was outside, and then there was the Mizbeach HaZahav, which was inside the Mishkan, the inner part of the Mishkan.
But how they were able to build with Zahav if there was a golden calf?
That's a very good question. But I'm not going to answer that right now. In Perek Lamed, Pasuk Gimel, the Pasuk says, V'tzipita oso zahav tahor. Again, this is the Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden Mizbeach, coated in gold tahor. Et gago, this is the end of Titzaveh. Et kirotav saviv. Ve'asita lo zer zahav saviv. You make it a crown around it. Comes along the Midrash, and it's a Gemara in Masechet Yoma, Ayin Bet Amud Bet, and it says, each of these zer corresponds to one of the Ketarim that are spoken about in Pirkei Avot. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, I'm going to read it to you right now, and it says the crown of each of these Kelim corresponds to one of the crowns listed in Pirkei Avot where there's 3 crowns.
And there is an extra.
Hold on, that's what we're going to get to in a minute. So what is Pirkei Avot? It's Perek Dalet, Mishnah Yud Bet, or some have the Girsa Yud Gimel. But it says like this, it's the end of the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Shlosha Ktarim Heim. There are 3 crowns. Keter Torah, crown of Torah. The Keter Kiuna, the crown of Kiuna. The Keter Malchut, and the crown of Malchut. Good? Crown of Malchut. Well, that's 3. I just listed 3. Keter Torah, Keter Kiuna, and Keter Malchut. 3 crowns. Explains the Midrash. It's a Midrash Rabbi. I just pulled it up. Explains the Midrash Rabbi. He says like this. And the Rashi actually brings this down on the Torah. He explains each one. The Aron was symbolic of Keter Torah. So the crown that went around it was associated with Torah, with the greatness of Torah. So it has a crown which is Keter Torah. Beautiful. The Shulchan, what would you say, Chevra? What do you think?
Keter, because the head like the Mizbeach. Keter Kiuna. No.
It's Keter Malchut. Why is it Keter Malchut? Very interesting, because this is one explanation, but who's responsible to provide food for the people? The king, the bread. So there's a correlation between the Shulchan HaMelech, you can say a lot of things. The Keter of the Shulchan is Keter Malchut. And finally, the Zer around the Mizbeach HaZahav is associated with Kiuna, that's Keter Kiuna. But wait a second, before we finish off, that Mishnah does not end there. What does the Mishnah say? Who pointed this out?
Somebody.
The Keter, you said it. Natan, shkoyach. The Keter Shem Tov Ole al Gabein. It says the crown of Shem Tov. What is Shem Tov?
Good name.
A good name, a good reputation is greater than all of them. So was there? We didn't see another Zer. There's no other crown. So the Midrash explains the menorah and its lights. It wasn't a zer, but it had lights, and the lights was like the crown of the menorah, and that was like the crown of Shem Tov. Tov Shem and Tov Mishem Tov. Tov Shem Mishem and Tov. There's some correlation between reputation and oil. So there's a correlation between the menorah that we light and good reputation. That's the 4th one. Okay? So far, so good. I'm going to tell you what the Rambam says on that Mishnah in a minute. But really what we're going to focus in on over here is, based on that Mishnah that we just introduced, we know Kiuna goes to the Kohanim. I can't be a Kohen no matter how much I try. I could try really hard. I could even marry a Kohenet. But you know what happens? My kids are not Kohanim. I can't convert to being a Kohen. I could really want to be a king, right? But the problem is, we know Pasuk tells us, Lo yasur shevet miYehuda u'mchokek mibein raglav. What does that mean? That the kings only come from Shevet Yehuda. By the way, I learned the Gemara in Sanhedrin recently, before Shtema for Yaakov ben Dinah. The Gemara tells us not only did the kings come from Yehuda, But even when they went into Bavel and there were leaders of the Jewish people there, they also came from Yehuda, which means the leaders came from Shevet Yehuda. I could try to be a king as much as I want, I'm not going to be a king. I'm never going to be a king. I'm just not, unless I don't know, maybe I'm from Yehuda. I don't know, but if I'm not from Yehuda, we don't know.
You are.
No matter how much I want to be a king, I can't be a king if I'm not from Yehuda. If I want to be a Kohen, I can't be a Kohen. Even if I go to the rabbi and I say, I'll give you $1 million, can I be a Kohen? I can be a king? He says $2 million, Baruch Hashem, okay, then I'll be a king. Tachlis, I can't be. So it was a kasha. The Ramban talks about it. Kasha, good kasha. As before David took over, it's a good question. So which one am I able to attain if I would like to?
Keter Shem Tov.
Before that, Keter Torah. Keter Torah. That is something that I could attain on my own if I want to. That's not designated for a particular people. There's no shevet. If I want to absorb Keter Torah, I want to embody the greatness of Torah, I could. And also, by the way, what Matan just pointed out, Keter Shem Tov. So before we even start, I just want to tell you that the Rambam says a beautiful thing here about this, because the Mishnah starts off and says there's 3 Ktarim, and then it says 4 things. Right? You hear the question. Because first it says there's 3 Ktarim. It says Torah, Keuna, Malchut, and the Keter Shem Tov Ola Al Gabeyan. So what's going on? Is there 3 or are there 4?
So the Shem Tov is represented by the menorah.
That's what the Midrash brings down. So the Rambam says a beautiful thing. I'm going to read to you the Rambam. It says on that Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, he says, based on the Gemara, it relates to these kelim. So he says like this: Elu shalosh ma'alot tovot ninu le'uma zo b'tchila netinat haTorah. Beginning of the giving of the Torah, these 3 great levels were given to the Jewish people. HaKeuna v'amalchut v'aTorah. Keuna, regarding Keuna, zacha bo Aaron. Aaron and his children merited for all of eternity. Malchut, when it comes to kingship, zacha bo David HaMelech and his descendants. V'keter Torah munach lekol mi sheyirtzeh lihitater bo. Based on the Gemara in Yevamot, he's quoting, I bet to bet. Keter Torah is for anyone, it's placed for anyone who wants to grab it and become glorified by it. V'amru rabotenu zechonam levracha. Chazal teaches there in Yoma. V'shema tomar, maybe you'll say, shezah keter pachutu mishnayim achirim. Maybe you'll say, that crown of Torah, it's not as important as the other 2. It's not as great as Malchut. It's not as great as Keuna. Eno Kain, says the Gemara, it's not true. Aval gadol hu mishnehem. It's greater than both of them. Ubo yeyu ashnayim. Through Torah, you could accomplish the other 2. I said I can't be a melech. It's not true. I can't be a Kohen. It's not true. How do I know that? Shene Emar, because the pasuk tells us in Mishle, Bi melachim yimlochu, v'roznim yechokeku tzedek, a reference to the fact that a person who embodies the Torah is called a melech. I'm not really a king. And it also says, Bi sarim yasoru, with me officers will become glorified, which is the capacity to embody, at least in some reality, Malchut and Keuna, etc. Aval Keter Shem Tov. But now what about Keter Shem Tov? It's a 4th one. Magia me'et HaTorah. He says that's the crown. It's not something outside of it. It is the crown that you naturally accomplish, you naturally reach if you embody Keter Torah. Atzelomar, Yediata v'ama'aseba. Knowing Torah and performing Torah. That brings you to Keter Shem Tov. Ki bahen yagia Hashem hatov amiti. Because through the Torah is the only real good name that a person is able to accomplish. It's a beautiful Rambam. So that means I was not born a Kohen, Sedem. I was not born a king, Sedem, no problem. But I have the capacity to achieve Keter Torah if I want. Munach l'chol mi sheyotzeh. If the yotzeh, but if you want, it's there. It's there for the taking. And if you go and work and become a Ben Torah, Tamid Chacham, you accomplish Keter Torah. From that, because of the limud and the ma'aseh that you're doing, you could also reach the level of Keter Shem Tov. That's the Rambam. Beautiful Rambam. Okay?
But what about Keuna? You can receive Keuna?
No, you can't.
You can,
so that's what the Rambam's saying. Very interesting chidush. There are psukim that imply that somebody that embodies the Torah it's not a real malchut. It's not.
considered is.
It's like. Exactly. It's like. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's like. Exactly. 100%.
Also like a king. You're gonna be like a king.
Exactly.
Not
Like a
gonna be
king.
a king.
Not really a king.
Like
Exactly.
Because Dolei
Right.
Israel are the leaders. So
Right.
they are like.
The psukim call him a king. They call him a kohen. Beautiful. Excellent. What was the next step? Oh, let's take this one step further now. Focusing on this Keter Torah. This is really what I wanted to focus on tonight. We learned a beautiful Mishnah this morning and a major Chidush from the Tiferet Israel. And then, God willing, we'll finish off with the Kli Yakar, and that'll be our night. B'ezrat Hashem. So Keter Torah is accessible for whoever wants. You want to accomplish Keter Torah, you have to apply yourself, you have to study, you have to perform the Torah, but you could become Keter Torah and then Keter Shem Tov as well. Other ones, there's a zer, it's a crown, but it's not something that we can naturally absorb. It's only by inheritance, we know that. And we learned the Mishnah this morning. And this Mishnah, we learned a major Chidush from Tiferet Israel. Remember this morning? You don't remember. I'm not going to challenge you, don't worry.
Once you start,
I'll start you off, you'll remember.
You just don't want to, you know.
He doesn't want to show off.
don't want to
That's
take
it.
your spot.
That's what...
let you run the show.
תמשיך כבודו.
Perek Vav Mishnah Gimel, Perkei Avot also. We learned a beautiful chidush, which was like this. We said, I'm not going to read the beginning of the Mishnah. But we said, if you learn a Dvar Torah, a word of Torah from another person, you have to treat them with respect. Now you remember. Even if you learn Ot Achat of Torah, even if you learn one letter of Torah from another person, you have to treat them with the greatest respect. Now why is that? I'll give you an example. If Yosef comes over to me and he tells me, it doesn't say Eile HaMishpatim. These are the rules. It says Ve'eile HaMishpatim. It says the and the. Oh, there's a Vav HaChibur that connects. Ma Rishonim Misinai, Av'eile Misinai. He teaches me one letter. There's so many things you learn from that one letter. So even if somebody teaches me just one letter of Torah, I have to treat them with respect. So we pointed out this morning, based on that, we could understand what it means when it says in Masechet Ta'anit, we learned it. I think it's Daf Chet, Zayin. We learned, the Gemara says, I learned a lot from my Rabbeim, from my teachers.
My friends and from my students.
Mechavera yoter mehem, I learned more from my friends. And the most, mitalmidai yoter mikulam. I learned the most from my students. And Rashi explains why. Remember what Rashi says?
Because they have questions.
Because they're constantly asking questions. So if the students are constantly challenging the Rebbe, he has to figure out, how do I answer this guy and then that guy and the other one? Everything gets much sharper in his head. Versus when you learn Mechavuta, okay, you're challenging me a little bit, but not like a student. Like 10 students are eager to study, excited to learn. So therefore, if that's true, you have to give respect if somebody teaches you one letter. So certainly then a Rebbe who learns from his students, which is the natural thing, has to give his students the greatest kavod. You see, very clear. Very clear. Pashut. Without question.
I have another question.
You hear that though? Pashut.
Aren't we supposed to respect each other with or without learning one letter of Torah?
True.
Does it have to be because we learn Torah from them?
It's true, but you don't have to call him Rebbe.
I
Different.
understand, but there is a condition for me to respect another person.
Yeah?
Or
No.
מלכתחילה.
It's true, but there's a greater level of kavod if he teaches you Torah. No? What do you say, Daniel?
Yes, I
No,
know.
there's a greater level of respect. Greater level. Let's continue in the Mishnah. The Mishnah finishes off after saying that beautiful chidush. It says, where is the example that we learn this from, by the way? Story with David and Achitophel. Achitophel was an advisor of David, who was a great Talmid Chacham, great scholar, a great wise man. He used to give great counsel, great advice, but he turned. Not only did he turn, but in the end he rebelled against David HaMelech along with Avshalom, and he ended up died in a terrible way. Fine. But this Achitophel taught David HaMelech 2 chidushim. Remember the 2 chidushim? He taught him 2 chidushim. What were the 2 chidushim?
You start, I finish.
One, he said, is you're not supposed to learn Torah by yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's what we argue.
We argued, right? Every morning, people think every morning I give a class. Every morning, me and Yosef argue. And I also have tried to give a class. So the first thing Achitofel taught David HaMelech, Melech Yisrael, was you shouldn't learn by yourself. And the second thing he taught him was when you come into the Beit Midrash, you should walk in with energy, but not bekomas kufa, not with ga'ava. You should walk in humble, but with energy. Okay, two things Achitofel taught David HaMelech. And we find, the Psukim tell us, because he taught him just two chidushim, two words, two ideas, David HaMelech called him the greatest thing, Alufim, Yudai, called him the greatest levels of respect. So we say if he respected, he was David HaMelech, and Achitofel was not the king, obviously, so if somebody teaches me even one letter, I have to give him the greatest kavod. That was beautiful. But then the Mishnah finishes off with something that's a bit vague. It says like this. Now that I know that idea, Mishnah says, Ve'ein kavod ele Torah. There's no honor but Torah. The only honor is Torah. Shne'emar, like the pasuk says, kavod chachamim inchalu, utmimim inchalu tov. Fine. Ve'ein tov ela Torah, and it says the tmimim inherit good. What is that referring to? Good is Torah. Shne'emar, like the pasuk says, ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al ta'azov. So it says that, firstly, the only kavod is Torah. Kavod chachamim inchalu. Honor is inherited by the chachamim. Utmimim inchalu tov, and the pure ones, the innocent, the tzaddikim, they inherit good, refers to the Torah. So what does it mean? What is the Mishnah saying? What does that have to do with the previous point? So the Tiferet Yisrael explains, just before we tell you the major chidush, he says, since the students are learning from their Rebbeim Torah, they have to give their Rebbeim the greatest honor. Now why? Why is that? So he says like this, beautiful idea. And this is the Tiferet Yisrael. What does it mean when the Mishnah says, Ein kavod ela Torah? The only kavod is Torah. The only honor is Torah. It's not true. I'll tell you, it's not true. You look around.
Somebody have money, he's also...
He has money. He walks into shul, and everybody says, "Do you want shlishi?" You know, the guy walks into the wherever, and everyone's helping him out. You want a little drink? Yeah, boss. Yeah, this, that. Is that not kavod? So what does it mean, ain't kavod? The only kavod is Torah. What does it mean? You
The
remember
only thing that can give you kavod in this world is the Torah.
It's not true.
Real kavod.
But it's not. Oh, so what does it mean real? But how do you explain that then?
Because it's
If you give...
because
you give kavod,
Torah is eternal.
Okay, that's true.
Kesef or any other thing comes and goes.
if you have kesef,
No.
they give you kavod because of the kesef, not because of you.
Right. No.
But Torah...
Yes,
Once the-
Hazak Baruch.
The same person was rich and then became poor. Everybody.
Hold on, what happened after somebody died? The kesef is gone. Finished. But Torah
The wife take the kesef.
The Torah stay with you up there.
So listen
But
to
I'm
this
saying,
Gemara.
the money comes and
The
goes.
Tiferet Yisrael says such a beautiful idea, it's kedai to mention it again now. Tiferet Yisrael says like this. When that rich guy walks in, he's driving his car and everybody's looking and giving him kavod. It looks like
The big
kavod.
shot came.
They're not giving him kavod.
They give the car.
They're giving the car kavod. It happens to be he's driving the car. When he walks into shul and they say, "You want shlishi?" I'm not, chas v'shalom, I don't want to be mizalzel. If they're tomech Torah, I'm not talking about. The people, the real people. The real people, I'm not talking. The ones that just stam are showing off and they say, "You want shlishi?" That guy, they're not giving the guy shlishi. They're not giving the guy kavod. They're giving his money. It happens to be, he's the one who gives the money.
They're giving the bank account.
They're giving the bank account shlishi, beautiful. And the shul does it because they need to make money. As I get us, that's that's society we live. You need to do, okay, you need to do. Tomchim, it's nebuch, okay, fine. But when you give a Talmid Chacham kavod, now what I want to say is, you're giving him kavod. But how do I know that? You could say what Yosef was saying this morning. He was arguing with me, which is a good argument. What did you say? You're not giving him honor. You're giving the Torah honor. So listen to the Gemara in Kiddushin, a beautiful Gemara. Lamed Bet Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. And Rashi explains it like this. We know in the first chapter of Tehillim, first the pasuk David HaMelech tells us, the first chapter. Ki'im b'Torat Hashem chefzo. Let's translate into English. Only in Torat Hashem, the Torah of Hashem, is a tzaddik's desire. He desires Torat Hashem, and that's it. What's the next words? Uvetorato, and in his Torah,
He make his own Torah.
he works hard. So the Gemara says, wait a second. It's based on the Gemara in Kiddushin, like bet. Wait a second. First it calls the Torah Hashem. Then it calls it Torato. So which one is it? Says Rashi in Masechet Kiddushin as follows. Batchila hinekre Torah Hashem. First it's called, before you study it and you break your head and you absorb it and you make it part of you, it's considered Torah Hashem. Umishalamda, but once you study it, Vigorsa, and you have it fluent in your mouth, it's become a chelek of you. Hinekre Torato, that becomes your Torah. So when the Chacham walks in and you stand up and give him kavod, you're giving his Torah kavod, but the Torah is a chelek of him. It's now part of him. So therefore, says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, that's why students, you're a Rebbe, you're teaching me Torah, you're giving me the greatest honor in the world, because now you're making something part of me that is truly deserving of kavod for me, not for what comes outside of me, like my money or my social status or my social media or my but it's what's part of me. And I told Yosef another example of this. We said ultimately we know after 120, God willing, we go to the Keter. What do we take with us to the Keter? We take our Porsche and our Ferrari. We take our house by the water. We don't take you don't take any of that with you. What do you take with you? Torah u'ma'asim tovim. What's part of you? Torah u'ma'asim tovim. Unbelievable. So what the Mishnah is telling us here is the ein kavod ela Torah. The only real, it's beautiful. This is Tiferet Yisrael, it says basically. The only real kavod, the only thing that you are getting honor for, you are really, now we don't do it for the honor, we do it because we want to become close to Hashem, we want to know His chokhmah. But the only real honor that's given to a person, to him, to you, is when you study Torah, you make it part of you, and you're involved in it, and you break your head over it, that's Torah that becomes yours. And then when they give you honor because of that, you are getting honor, because that's now a chelek of you. Everything else, it's outside of them. And that's not kavod at all. It's kavod for the item, it's not kavod for the person. So to wrap up.
It still feels good to drive a Bentley.
It still feels good to drive a Bentley. I'm not going to disagree with you about that, Yosef. I can't argue or agree because I've never done it and I don't really care to do it. But just to wrap up.
Disagree with the statement here.
Let's just wrap up, Kevin.
With the shadow.
We have the idea, just to wrap up just to wrap up what we said. The honor, the Torah, the Aron HaKodesh represents Keter Torah. Keter Torah is something that everyone has the ability to achieve. Everyone has the ability to become part of. And when they do absorb that, as the Rambam told us, that's the way you get to Keter Shem Tov. That's the way we actually, through our ma'asim, through our study, through improving ourselves, now we're better people, we're less angry, we're more giving. All of the things the Torah does to us and for us, you accomplish Keter Shem Tov. And as Tiferet Yisrael was telling us also, everything else in the world that you think you can get to receive honor, that's not giving you honor. It might even feel good when they're looking at your Porsche, or when they're giving you the shlishi. It might feel good, but it's fake because they're not giving it to you.
Right.
They're not giving it to you. They're giving it to your bank account. Ya'amod, bank account, $3 million, shlishi, that's what they're doing basically. But if you call him up because Chacham, you learn Torah, so then what's going on is, it's a portion of him, and we all have the ability to accomplish that. So B'ezrat Hashem, we should all be zocheh to really accomplish Keter Torah.
Amen.
And through this accomplish Keter Shem Tov as well, and make Torato, it becomes a part of us, that we're involved in it, becomes a chelek of us, inside of us, and through that accomplish really the greatest things in life.